Hello, I'm Travis Owens with Cherokee Nation Cultural Tourism, and today I'm joined with Jane Osti, Cherokee National Treasure, artist, and potter. Jane Osti is a featured artist at Saline Courthouse Museum with her exhibit, Jane Osti, Our Pottery, Our People. Jane, tell me a little bit about what you're working on today.
I am rolling out a slab to put on this form to start making a traditional Cherokee stamp pot. Anyway, I've gotten this kind of thin here to where it'll fit over this bowl. And a long time ago, they probably put it over an old pot or an old gourd. You have to have a base underneath it to paddle it. And paddling was our oldest way of decorating a pot. And I'm just going to do a really rough start here for the demonstration, but usually I'd have it all smooth and cut. And the first way that we decorated was just with fiber. This is a synthetic thing, but people knew how to put some fibers around a board way back then. But this was just to make texture on the pot. And then we got the wooden paddles, and they had pretty generic designs that just pretty much for texture also. And then as the eons went on, we graduated to what they call the complicated stamp patterns. And they made, well, first we were just doing it for utilitarian reasons. The pot was easier to hold, and the heat was easier to dispense, and just a couple of things like that. And then after we got that taken care of, then we wanted them to be pretty. So we got stamps like this. And this is one of the most used stamps we had in Cherokee pottery, was some form of this circular type, which makes a really pretty design. And this one was taken from old basket work. It's one of my very favorites too.
Jane, thank you for sharing that knowledge that I know has taken you years and years to amass, the knowledge of stamps and our Southeastern pottery. But take me a little bit back before you had that knowledge. So 1986, you're at NSU, you're studying for a Bachelor of Arts degree, and then you happen upon a ceramics class that I think you put off for a while, right?
Until I had to take it to get my degree.
So tell me a little bit about that, how that pottery class kind of set you on this path to where we're at today.
Okay. Well, first of all, I had a wonderful teacher that really, really inspired me. I wanted to learn really bad, so I was in that ceramics building practically 20 hours a day. And I liked what he was showing me, what I was learning. I liked the feel of the clay and the smell of the clay, and I was just totally addicted to it. Anyway, after doing that, I continued in pottery, and it's been 30-some years now. And that first year I was doing pottery, I also met Anna Mitchell then. Before that, I was doing wheel throwing at school, but I was still using our designs or Southeast designs. And then I met Anna, and she was the great inspiration that made me want to do coil pottery. Plus, she educated me a lot about what it meant to be a Southeastern potter. But at that time, we were doing mostly incising. She had a couple of rocker stamps, so we didn't have the paddle stamps then. But we would incise, draw the designs on the pots, like some of these. And after a while, we met people in the Eastern Band, and they taught us about the paddle stamping. They had relearned it in the year 2000. We learned it from them in 2005. And I guess it had been lost about 150 years since removal before we started doing this again. So that was, well, I know Anna took the class when they were here with us, the Eastern Band, and she said, I wish I'd known that 30 years ago. And so that's how happy we were to see some of our old stuff come back.
That's great. So tell me a little bit about Anna. I know I've heard from you over the years, and I had a chance to know her, but tell me a little bit about how your all's paths crossed, and then how you started doing the pottery you're doing today.
Okay, I had to interview someone for a Cherokee class that I was taking, and I chose her because I was just starting to do pottery, and I went to her house. She came to the door, and she was scary to me. She was real stern looking. Anyway, I took some photographs of her that day, and I was taking a sculpture class also, so I got real inspired with those photographs and did this big old sculpture of her, which is out at the Nation in the foyer. And it don't look so much like her, it's just the way I felt about her. It's more than a perfect picture representation of her. But I admired her so much that she started from nothing, taught herself, visited a lot of museums, and had a lot of help that way of different archaeologists and museum people telling her things. But she learned how to make it, learned how to fire it. She did the whole thing by herself. And she was so generous to me, sharing anything she could with me.
So when you came to know her, what year was that?
I think it was 87,
Okay.
but I'm not positive.
And for those that may not know, she was really responsible for really reviving
Yes.
pottery here in Cherokee Nation, Oklahoma.
Right.
And for all the reason you talked about before, but where was she kind of in her journey of understanding and doing Cherokee pottery at that time when you met her?
She was at the height of her career. I knew her maybe the last 25 years of her life. But I think when we start, just learning, and then you've got 10, 20, 30 year span there where you're at the height of your career. And like the last 10 or 15 years of her life, she wasn't working that much. And her vision was getting bad. And it's like you come full circle. She started at this place and she did all this wonderful stuff, and then she kind of came back around the circle. But her husband passed away in 98. And I think that he was such a part of her life, her pottery life too, and such an encourager that she kind of lost the heart for doing it after he passed away.
Well, what about that relationship you formed with her, led you into the pottery you're doing today?
Well, when I got to know her, she was going to Indian Market and all that, and she told me a lot of good stories about market, a lot of funny ones. And at first, I have students that went to Santa Fe 2 years after they learned, but I didn't think I could do that. And I took 5 years, I think, or longer than that, before I even applied for Santa Fe. But seeing her do it opened the doors for a lot of us to go ahead and try it.
I'm interested by the fact that, one, you were intimidated, because I think about where you are today in your pottery. And then, but when you went and knocked on that door, did you see, that this is something you were hoping to learn, or were you really just seeking an interview at that point?
Maybe both.
So you may have had an ulterior motive to do that interview?
She wasn't scary at all after I got to know her. I was just scared that first day because I admired her and she was way up on this pedestal to me. But we had a lot of fun together, a lot of friendship of over 25 years, and we did a lot of things together. And when she got older, she used to ride to Santa Fe with me when she wasn't doing the show, and she would just go take her little walker and go visit all day because she knew a ton of the artists.
Well, tell me a little bit about, so that's a good segue from, you mentioned Santa Fe and doing those shows. So it was 1990, so maybe 4 or 5 years after this, this knock on the door, when you started doing your first shows. I think the first one was Red Earth, right? Mm-hmm. So tell me about that first show and kind of, putting yourself out there with doing art as a career.
It was scary, but Anna, even before that, when we would be somewhere talking, or she would say, "Don't be shy, you speak up." She was always nudging me to speak up. I was so intimidated. But I did get an honorable mention for the sculpture, which was good. And anyway, I knew several of the artists. The Kenwood Co-op people were there, and a few, Kelly Haney, people like that, back in the old days. Anyway, I knew some people, and Gina Gray was a really good friend of mine, the Osage artist, and we hung out together. We were wearing our medals around our neck, all proud of them, our award medals. Anyway, that was my introduction, and then I started doing the other shows. But my first 5 years was just right around here. I don't even think that the Heritage Center allowed pottery when I first started. They just opened that up in 2004 or 5, I think. And it's Five Tribes Museum, just on the lawn over here at the courthouse, and NSU symposiums. I did a lot of just little shows.
from 1990 to today, and at some point you started gaining some serious notoriety for Cherokee pottery, and you really have established yourself as a premier Cherokee potter. Your work's now collected around the world. It's sought after by collectors and museums. I think some of them we were talking about, in Smithsonian's museums, including National Museum of American Indian, Denver Art Museum, even some here in Tahlequah at the Cherokee National History Museum. Mm-hmm. So tell me about what did that feel like to kind of make that transition from 1990 starting at an art show to having people seek you out and want to purchase your art to help educate public and visitors?
Gosh, that was a long journey. And the first several years, like I said, I was on the road doing shows all over the country, from California to North Dakota to Florida and just everywhere in between. And my pottery especially would mostly sell in the Southwest. That was my best market until Cherokee Nation Business and Cherokee Nation started the program. So it was just a little bit here and there, and then some people asked me to do something for the Philbrook and something the Denver Art Museum stopped by and got a piece. So it just gradually grew. So grew, and then I think in 2005 you were recognized as a Cherokee National Treasure in pottery. Mm-hmm. Really, only the second person to be deemed with that title. So take me back to 2005. You get maybe not a phone call at that point, but you got some notification that you're being awarded a National Treasure. What was that day like? Well, it was really great, and Anna was really proud of me too. She was happy for me, but they didn't tell us until right at the very end before the national holiday. So that it really felt rewarding, and I felt really good to be following in her footsteps also.
So what is today, as a National Treasurer, you serve on the National Treasures Advisory Committee. Mm-hmm. What does that mean to you? What does it mean to be a National Treasurer today?
Well, it means we have to behave a little bit. But I try to do the best artwork I can to represent our people and our nation, and to teach others about it, to make sure that we keep our traditions alive. That's one big responsibility.
We were talking earlier about just the number of people who you have taught, mm-hmm. and some you've had success with, but mm-hmm. how important is it for you to continue to educate and teach pottery within Cherokee Nation and then beyond?
Mm-hmm. It's been really important, and I really love teaching too. I think you can tell you took a class. It's really thrilling to see people get it and want to know what is ours, where we came from, and I really treasure the teaching part of it. And sometimes I'm not doing it as much as I used to, but when I do, I think, why did I ever slow down? Let's teach some more. And it's real rewarding to see people understand it. Like Rachel, my one-time student, she made these pieces over here, and she's only taken one class, and you only took one class, and you did great. But I've had a lot of people do great that they weren't able to continue. I've had maybe 3 or 4 that continued. But a lot of people just have such busy lives and other obligations that they can't do it. But I've had a lot of talented people that could have been really, really good.
Well, what's that like when those handful of people you talked about, when you see them out there? You talked about how proud Anna was of you when you got the National mm-hmm. Treasure. So what's that like for you when you see somebody who's actively doing pottery and then winning awards and making notoriety themselves?
Yeah. I believe one year at Santa Fe, I had 4 students there that won awards.
Wow.
And that felt really good. And at one time when I was teaching a whole lot out at the other studio out by the Nation, I think I had 10 students enter the Trilatier show or the homecoming show, one or the other. And several of them got awards, but those are sort of highlights that stand out.
We talked a little bit about, you've been a student yourself, you've been a teacher, you've been on the road, I think you said, for like 20 years doing pottery, and
a lot.
tried to settle down. You've attended markets all across the world, and but you talked about, in the early 2000s, you were able to kind of slow that down a little bit because of the investment Cherokee Nation was making in cultural art through the 1% Legislative Art Act.
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about that and how that's changed your life.
I don't think I could have continued the road warrior thing for very much longer. You know, it's really hard on you. And when Cherokee Nation or these entities began to buy from us, that kept me from having to go on the road so much. And I'm so grateful. And I have told a lot of people how grateful I am, because now we can work toward the sales when they're going to buy instead of being out there driving 2,000 miles to a show. So that has really helped a lot.
So we got a couple of questions from our social media audience. So let me ask you a couple of those if we've got time. But one person asked on Instagram, she said, what specifically is Cherokee pottery? So what makes something Cherokee in terms of a pot? And then how does it differ from other tribes?
Okay, we have specific designs, a few that are specific to our tribe, but a lot of them are universal. I see them in other tribal pottery. But I guess the main thing that makes them Cherokee is that a Cherokee person's making them, that makes it Cherokee pottery. But then we have these designs and things that we use that we know are attributed to our prehistoric Cherokee pottery. So I like to use those. Now, when Anna and I first started, we used any design that was Southeast, whether it was Caddo or whatever. We didn't have the information we have now. And after we started getting that information in the internet, we knew more things that were Cherokee. And now we have other potters that, don't you use that Caddo design, or don't you use that design? And I try to stick with it where I'm using Cherokee designs. But my early 20 years of work, I was using any Southeastern design I could find. I didn't care which tribe it belonged to. Because Anna did too, because we just didn't have the information that let us know which ones were which.
Well, and that's what another question on Instagram had asked. How does the style of pottery you're doing today differ from those centuries ago? Or does it?
Every once in a while, I try to make a piece that is sort of like a replica, real close, but I mostly don't deal in that. I mostly use it in new ways. Like, I doubt if we had a pot that was decorated just like this one. But I have used elements of our old designs in there. And the same thing with here, this from some of our old stuff, but of course these hands are contemporary. And we did make squash pots, but they were mostly more closed in, so this is a little different than the old ones. But I don't know, I guess I could say the foundation is always based on our own pottery, our old pottery.
Very good. Well, I think that's about all the time we have for today. And Jane, thank you so much for joining us. And another question we had is, somebody said, can we purchase the pottery online? And so I hope, Jane's got a few pieces that are going to be available for sale. And we're going to have those up on our website. And we'll post a link in the comments below. And then if you've ever experienced Jane's work, you know she does a tremendous amount of pottery. And she's really a great steward for Cherokee people, and a great educator. So we appreciate you participating in this interview, and then we appreciate your exhibit.
Thank you.
Jane Osti's exhibit, Our Pottery, Our People, is on display at the Saline Courthouse Museum now through December 26th. Again, her pottery will be available for sale in the exhibit. She does have some pottery that's for display only as well that you can check out. And then we hope you have an opportunity to visit and then check some of this out online. Thank you for joining us.